All right, shall we have a go together? I just thought I'd warm your brains up. We've moved a little bit past interquartile range and quartiles as a matter of focus because they're okay as statistical tools, but as you'll see in this lesson, like we've gone way past interquartile range. It's a fairly quick tool that gives you a rough sense, but we have more sophisticated tools in our arsenal to understand a statistical data set. However, still very handy. It's like a quick and dirty look. I can just see this and get a sense of how spread out a data set is. That's what interquartile range, which is kind of the end of the question, is all about. Now, you've been asked, I should unfreeze this, that would be helpful. You've been asked, there we go, to work out the middle quartiles, Q1, Q2, Q3, and helpfully, like this is why they're starter questions, right? The first thing that you needed to do with these data sets has actually already been done for you. If you get given a data set and you need to work out quartiles, what is the first thing you need to do with that data before you can even work out anything? Yeah, you need to get them in order, which you can see has already been handed to you. They're in ascending order. You can put them in descending order. It doesn't matter, does it? But as long as you read it the right way. Okay. Now, I've deliberately chosen these two because before we look at the answers, before you guys give me suggestions, the key difference between these two data sets is not the actual data points, but how many data points there are. Make sense? In the first case, there are 7, and in the other case there are 8 if I counted correctly. And you have to handle the quartiles slightly differently in each case. So let's have a look at this one first. Which is the easiest of the quartiles to identify?
Median.
Just the median, right? Because you're looking right in the middle. And in fact, Q1 and Q3 are in the middle of the two sections you end up creating from the median. So because this is an odd number of scores, right? 1 all the way through to 7, and they're in order. Which of the scores, what order along from 1 to 7 is the median? It's the 4 score, right? Because it's got 3 on either side. So this one right here, that's going to be Q2, the median. Okay, so then the next question is, well, when I work out Q1, the lower quartile, and Q3, the upper quartile, which are the scores that I'm looking at? Do I include 13 when I'm doing my calculation here or not? You actually kind of exclude it, right? You kind of then think about, let's think of this as its own separate data set, and then we'll think of this as its own separate data set. And that makes it actually quite straightforward, doesn't it? That gives you Q1 right there and Q3 right there. Are you happy with how we identified that? So what is the interquartile range in this case? It's just 10. 17, take away 7, happy times. All right, so when we come over here and we look at this data set, because you have an even number of scores, it's immediately different, right? So where do I look? I don't have a middle score anymore. There isn't, like the 4th score and the 5th score, neither of them is the middle, so what do? Yeah, I'm going to take the mean of the 2 middle scores. So that's these two right here. So I'm going to go, the median is equal to, well, it'll be 37 divided by 2, which I guess is 18.5. Happy with that? Okay, so now I'm going to ask the same question. As I identify Q1 and Q3, where do I go? Which scores do I include? Do I include 17 and 20? Yeah. I do. Now, hold on. This is interesting to me. Why do I include them this time, but before you told me to take it away? I'll answer that question in a second, but let's first actually do it. So I'm going to just draw a line right down the middle, okay? And so this left data set here, we drew a box around it before. There's an even number of scores. So when I'm going for Q1, what do?
Take the average of
same thing that I did before, right? So there's my 12 and 13. So that gives me Q1 being 12 and a half. And then same exercise over here. So the upper quartile is, you've already worked it out, it's 25 and a half. Okay, and I'm not even going to work out, I don't know why I changed to fractions there, I'll keep it as decimals. I'm not even going to work out the interquartile range because I think you guys are fine with that. Okay, now here's the real question. Why did we exclude the median over here, but you included the 2 scores that created the median over here? Any suggestions? Ian, what are you thinking?
Neither of them are actually the actual median.
So the first suggestion, which is not a bad one by the way, is, well, I excluded the median before because it was one of the scores. Here, neither 17 nor 20 are the median, so I just let them stay put. I'm okay with that. It's not a bad, that's actually the way that I learnt it to begin with, like when I was in year 12. But there's actually a different reason that we can go to for why we actually include them and not exclude them. And I'll give you a clue. It's in the question. Rishi, what do you reckon?
Because when we have on the left for A, 13, if we would count it for one, then we have to count it for the other, so it'd be almost double counting it. But then for the second one, we're doing is 17 and 20.
Okay, all right, so think about this for a second. Say that again, right? If I included it for here, like 13 is in the middle, right? So therefore, you sort of, it's overlapping between both of the scores, as it were. So you can't count it twice when you're trying to add up. Like, I want a proportion that divides up my score into 4 equal sections. By the way, that one was the big clue. Over here, because 17 and 20 were not included, you can actually just go right down the middle, right? Now, that's not bad. Again, it's in the right direction. I think there's an easier way to understand it there, which is that no one yet has said. So thumbs up to Ian and Rishi for putting their hat in. Danny, do you want to try more? Do you want to carry the class because you've been doing it?
It's literally quarters. So you've got the median is the midpoint. If it's one side of the midpoint, it's in one quarter. It can't be in both quarters. So if you're not included, if it's that midpoint, it can't be included in both sides. But if it isn't in that midpoint, then it's in the quarters, so it has to be included.
Okay. I've got a question for all of you. I need an honest answer for this, right? Because it's feedback for Daniel and for me as well. I'm actually curious. Who followed that explanation? 1, 2, 3 hands. Is it because you were kind of thinking something similar already? Or you're like, no, it made sense. Okay. So I followed it, but mainly because I already knew what the answer was, right? And there's a lesson here for all of us in terms of how we communicate our working. Your working has to make sense to someone who's not inside your brain and hasn't already thought these thoughts, your thoughts, before you have, right? Let me see if I can give the same explanation, but in a way that will hopefully will catch more of the class, okay? The core of it is exactly right. A quartile means, and I know some of you missed this, but well, actually, let's all write this down, right? Wherever you've got your question there, write down the word quartile again, because the key is in the word. A quartile is a score that divides into quarters. It's a score that divides into quarters. And how many quarters it depends on, well, which quartile are you interested in, right? So the first quartile, there's 1 quartile on the left. The second quartile, there's 2 quartiles on the left. The third quartile, there's 3 quartiles on the left. Make sense? Okay. Now, if that's the case, once you understand that, once you come over to this this set of 8 scores, it's very easy to see why you have to include the 17 and the 20. Let's imagine if we excluded them, okay? So let me, I will need this working again, but I'm just gonna put it over to the side here, okay? Let's just suppose we included our 17 and our 20 in our calculation, and then we said, oh, okay, I'm done with them now. We kind of did something similar to what we did before, okay? And now I look at these 2 data sets as separate, and I look at their medians, as it were. So if I then say, 12, 27, okay? Now think about what this means. If I say this is a quartile, then to the left of it, because this is apparently Q1, there should be 1/4 of the data. What's to the left of 12? It's just 8. There's just a single data point. 1 out of 8, that's not 1/4 of it, that's 1/8 of the data, 12.5%. Make sense? Whereas, let's go back now. If we include those scores and now put this back, okay, 12.5, that's what we were saying. What's to the left of 12.5? Answer, 2 scores, the 8 and the 12. That's 1/4. That's the whole point of a quartile. That's what it does. Make sense? So, the reason why I'm highlighting that is because we need to understand what these things are doing and why, and then the process, like whether you include it or not, you don't actually have to remember. Like, do I include it sometimes? Do I not? You just have to think about the function that it serves. Okay? Any other questions before we finish off with starters? Can I ask now, okay, how many of you understood that explanation? Is it clicking for you now? Now, by the way, don't feel bad, Daniel, because I've had 15 years of teaching this, plus, etc. But this is actually a really hard thing to do, to communicate, to understand it first, and then to have that in a form that others can comprehend themselves.